Hey, how are you? So, I saw many of you were interested on the topic of how to get over the fear of taking action. So, that's a really important topic because at the end of the day, fear is one of the main things that is going to hold you back on achieving your goals. So, let's start. Let's start. So, I will be sometimes looking at my left just because I have my notes here on my iPad. But yeah, that's what I'm looking at. And this is my new plant. I really hope you like it. And this is part of the new setting now. So yeah, so let's start. I want to start by asking you a question. So I want you to think about and remember a time or a memory in the past where you were really, really afraid of doing something, but you did it anyway and survived. And a time where you were really afraid, and once you took action, it actually wasn't as bad as you think. Because that's the main concept here. Sometimes we see fear as this horrible thing, when in reality, fear and faith are both based on something that doesn't exist or that hasn't happened yet, which is more likely the case. Like, fear and faith are both based on something in the future. Like, think about the time a time where you were really scared of doing something, and it was more the fear that was paralyzing you, and you spent more time worrying and getting scared. But in reality, the action itself only took like 1-2 minutes, or even like even if it was 1 hour, it was like something usually really, really fast, and you wasted all of the time getting scared and getting worried. But when at the moment of truth, it wasn't as bad as you think it was going to be. So I want you to ask you something. So if you knew the outcome already, how would you have acted differently? And probably your answer is going to be, I would just have done it faster and get it on with it and just do it very quickly. Because you the way to start getting over the fear is to act in the way you wish you had, and literally ask yourself, what is literally the worst thing that could happen? I want you to write down all of the excuses that you're making. Either is it because you're afraid of what your parents are going to think? Are you afraid of failing? Are you afraid of you're not gonna make it? Like, what is really the fear here? Because fear can be towards many things, but the moment you start identifying it, it's going to be so much easier to deal with it. Because let's say that you're afraid of what your parents or your family or your friends will say. Then an easy way to overcoming is, do they have to know every detail? Do you have to like share every single thing you're doing? Because you can be private about your goals too. Like, if you're really afraid of what people will say, sometimes they just don't have to know as much. Like, for me, that was like a really big fear. I was afraid of telling my parents my goals or things that I was going to do. But I just kept quiet about it, and until I finally saw success is when I started talking about it. And that was just such an easy fix. That way I was no longer afraid of what people would think, because they didn't have anything to talk about. Sometimes maybe if you're afraid of failing, you just need to reframe it. Like, the only way to fail is literally not trying, because every expert was once a beginning. And sometimes we're afraid of even trying it because we see all of these people having massive success and getting all their goals, but we're comparing ourselves. We're comparing our step zero or our step number 1 to someone steps 20. And that's something that is not very helpful, because you are setting expectations that are just not easy to meet. But if you compare yourself to someone who are just starting, how do you think those people who are big and massive, how do you think they started in the first place? Every expert was once a beginning. Unless you start taking consistent action, you are not going to reach that level of expertise. Also, if you're thinking about, no, like, I've tried many things in the past and this hasn't worked, how do I know this time is going to work, and so ask yourself, is am I really letting my past and even my present dictate my future? Because you can always change, like not because things has always been a certain way, that doesn't mean they can never change. Like you need to you need to understand that your current circumstances are not going to be defining of your future. I mean, you need to start making taking the actions in the present to create the future. But what you're currently experiencing right now is only the result of your past actions. So don't take it for granted, and don't take it as just because this is what is happening now and this is your reality right now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be forever. Sometimes all it takes is a decision, the decision to change, the decision to take a different path, the decision to trust in yourself, to have faith that you can do it, the decision to commit to your goals. So it's only a decision, because once you set the goal to actually be successful and actually create goals for yourself and actually change your life, everything starts just falling into place. Like the excuses don't have any room here, because the decision is already made. Like I remember when I really struggled for many months and years to have a morning routine. It was like the worst. Like I saw these people spending hours on their morning routine and I couldn't even commit 10 to 20 minutes. It was horrible and I actually felt defeated. But the reality, once I started my fear and like everything that was holding me back, turns out that I was trying to do many things at the same time, or that I didn't have the right system in place. So once I understand my true fear behind my inaction, it was easier to reframe it. And that's really important, because for me, in my particular case, I just started to pick one single habit and do the minimum viable habit I could make. For example, do I really have to meditate for 30 minutes, or can I just journal for 5? Or do I really have to jog for 1 hour, or can I just only do 1 kilometer? So once you understand your own excuses, it's going to be easier to fight them, because you truly understand how silly they can be and how easy to overcome they can be. Also, the fear is always bigger in our minds. Like I was mentioning before, sometimes we could be afraid for months or for days or for years about something, but when we actually do it, it's not so bad. So we always think it's going to be worse, but the actual action itself is not so bad. So in order to start getting over this fear, I want you to ask you something. So look at what you need to do, determine the price you will have to pay if you don't do it, and decide if the price is worth it or not. Because that's the thing at the end of the day. You need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And is that little discomfort worth the goal that you want to achieve? Like, is it really that goal so important to you that it's actually worth to be a little bit uncomfortable for a few days or a few months in order to finally achieve it? When you know and when you're comfortable with the outcome, then is when there is nothing to be afraid of. So when you really sit down and start thinking, okay, this is the worst that could happen, and this is what I want to get out of this, then it's not so bad after all. At the end of the day, the best cure for the fear of taking action is taking action itself, because once you take that action, you realize it's not so bad. If your issue is that you don't know how to start making it work for you, then you need to start really dig deep into your mindset and really dig start finding out what is the real fear, what is the root of this fear. Is it because you have tried something before and it didn't work? Is it because you're afraid it won't work? Because all of the fears that we have are usually unfounded. So most of the time we are afraid of doing these things, and it's not so bad at the end of the day. So once you start taking the right action, that fear starts to dissipate, and you might be scared shitless, and you might be like super worried, but in reality it's not so bad. Like for example, me right now, this was my comfortable action for the week. I was truly afraid of going live. That was my fear. But when in reality, when I actually hit play, the fear was gone, because this is just my first live. I don't have any big standard. Like, I'm thinking that it's not gonna be perfect anyways. Like, I don't believe in perfection. Like, what is the standard of perfection at the end of the day? So I know that this is my first try. It's not gonna be perfect, it's not, but I'm just trying it, and the more I start taking action and the more I get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the easier it will become. And I want you to adopt that mindset of always striving to be uncomfortable, because that's where growth occurs. And that's a phrase that you hear sometimes very often in the self-development space, but it's actually very true. Like, once you start taking action, many things comes. The fears start to dissipate, clarity starts to appear also, and you get better at it. Like, there are so many benefits of taking action, and once you start doing it, it's not so bad after all, because you are prioritizing the results and the outcome, and that's the main decision you have to make. So I really hope this was useful, and really hope you like it. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I will be answering this today, and I will talk about another topic next week. I will let you know in the stories. So I really hope you have a nice day and enjoy. Bye.